So I hope everybody's having a reasonable Sunday. Um, if you want to join the fleet, you can. Like I said in the ping, it's up. It's not a big deal. I do have it up on my screen so I can see if anybody's got any questions or anything. But it's going to be kind of a chill day with these, just like the last couple of these that we've done. There is a move up. Tentatively scheduled for 1930, so we'll be done by then. So you all can get in on that if you have something to move. That's for anybody who still has stuff up north, by the way. We're not moving out of 1DQ, it's for stuff out of the north. This was mentioned yesterday on the fireside just because the op was going yesterday, which was quite entertaining, I have to admit. I was watching from distance, I wasn't in on it, but I was watching the updates from all the FCs and the command team, and it was sounded like you guys had a pretty good time yesterday. Infinity. All right. So first question there: Who started BR? I assume you mean the Battle of BTAC-R. Um, the the interesting story on that. If you guys haven't seen the new E videos that have come out, not just last week but the week before, was it 3 weeks ago now? Time is a blur. But that 6-hour video is pretty impressive. I have to admit, I watched it in two-hour chunks just because finding 6 hours to sit and watch an E video is kind of difficult. I think he did a pretty good job with it. He does go into the history of BTAC-R, but I will tell you, there's two. Yep, a couple people just linked it into channel, into Fleet Chat. There's a couple of stories with this. So the way the kind of history has gone down as we understand it is that the wallet didn't have enough money to pay the SOV bill, or that the button to automatically pay the SOV bill wasn't checked. Those are the two different versions that was kind of accepted history. The version from our enemy's side, right? Of course, they're the bad guys. We hate them. Is that CCP fucked it up, and there was money in the wallet, and it was checked, and it's all their fault. But regardless of what happened, why it happened, what ended up occurring is in BTAC-R, the SOV dropped there. And so the system was vulnerable. And so what we did is we launched what is, at that point in time, the largest engagement of supers and titans that Eve had ever seen, right up to that point in time. The Battle of M2 completely just blew that away. But until that point in time, BTAC-R was the largest. It lasted, I think it was 20 hours or something insane like that. Vinny, I know who you are. Be quiet, you. The fact that you teed up a story that I knew I've actually told you before is whatever, man. I
I
recognize you.
was there.
I was too. And the interesting thing on that battle is not only did the engagement occur just in BTAC-R, but it was the systems around it. And so what ended up happening is a lot of us, myself included at the very beginning, we were in Dommies. We were in the old, they had so many different names. Sometimes they were called Potato Fleet because they're Dommies. Sometimes they were called Boot Fleet. That actually comes from the original Sentry boot carriers. They had all kinds of different names for them. But we were in basically Sentry Dominixes, and we were sitting on enemy staging stations as they were trying to undock reinforcements to get into BTAC-R. So not only did we have the engagement in BTAC-R itself, but we had people in multiple systems around the area just trying to slow them down and prevent them from getting reinforcements into that engagement. What we ended up doing was hell camping BTAC-R. Uh, After we had won the battle, right, we ended up hell camping them, and we did it for quite a while. I don't remember the exact number of days, but it was a good while that we just sat there with sentry carriers, with dummies basically at zero. And this is a time, now this mechanic doesn't exist now the same way that it did then, but what you could do is you could use what we called a drone bunny. You still have those, but it's not nearly as effective as it used to be. And what you would get is you'd get an entire fleet, 256 nerds with either sentry carriers or right sentry dummies, and you'd align them to, or you'd launch your drones because carriers could use drones at that point. You would assist your drones to a single fast locking ship. So there was like 255 nerds in battleships and carriers, and usually one guy in like a frigate, and he would sit right on the undock. He would lock onto the target, and he would usually use a target painter on it to get an aggressive action, and then all of the sentry drones would fire onto that target. And so you could get hundreds of drones for sentry carriers and um, the old boot dummies, right? Because even a dummy could launch five of them. Carriers had more. You would just huge amount of firepower would just slam into somebody as soon as they undocked, and that's the way hell camps used to work. Nessa, yeah. So sentry carriers today launch fighters. Well, they could at this point in time as well. This was 10 years ago. They could at this point in time also, but they could also carry regular drones. And so your carrier would have hundreds of drones, light drones, medium drones, heavy drones, sentries, logi drones, right? Shield and armor kind of things. Yeah, the drone bay was insane. I remember when my very first carrier that I got, it cost me, I think, more to put the drones into the carrier than the carrier cost me. And that was typical. The drone layout was insane. It was hundreds of drones that you had to carry. Because, right, I mean, think about it today. You launch your drones, they go like 50 kilometers away, and the FC's like, all right, we got to warp, and you lose your drones. Well, that's happened with carriers back then too. So you would carry like 5, 10 uh, launches of each drone. It was insane.
If you thought geckos were really cool, I think at one point the carrier could launch 10 of them if they had the drone control units on.
Yep, they could. Yeah, when the geckos first came out, they were a gift from CCP for Christmas one year. This would have been about the same time. Seems like that was about 10 years ago.
That was 2014.
Yep.
That's when they first came out.
Yeah, it's almost 10 years. So back at that point in time, CCP used to do actually cool stuff for Christmas gifts. Um, like there was the Zephyr one year that was a ship not too long after wormholes were created that you could go into it and the sleepers will not touch you. They will not target those ships. That was a gift one year from CCP to help encourage everybody to go into wormhole space, do all those kind of things. But the geckos originally was a gift one Christmas. Yeah, and so we all thought because CCP told us that they were not going to be an in-game item that you could build after that event. Turned out that was kind of true, kind of not true. So a lot of us kept the geckos because they were actually really useful and long-term investment. And I remember I was so pissed. It was probably 2 years later. The market price kept climbing on them, right? Because people would lose drones, right? Rats would shoot them, ships would get blown up with them. Price kept climbing and climbing, and I was just getting ready to sell a pile of them because the price had gotten nice. And CZP announced that they were going to reintroduce them as part of an event, and the price just fucking tanked. I was pissed. I had saved up them for like 2, 3 years, kept them in a can in Jita, just watching the market climb. And I was just getting ready to sell them when they announced that, and they tanked that price hard. Sorry, I'm just looking through fleet to make sure. Uh, yeah, Neva's the slow cats. Yeah, yeah. They were also called punish balls. They had a whole bunch of different names. It depends on which group you were with at the time. We usually called ours boot carriers, but and then we had the boot dummies and we had boot carriers, depending whether you were literally in a carrier or in a dummy, a Dominix. Keep in mind faxes for everybody. Faxes didn't exist at this point in time. The triage carrier was a thing, so you would see a carrier and you couldn't tell if it had a triage module fit or not with it because they would launch squadrons or, just piles of drones, and you're like, maybe they just haven't activated the triage module yet. Right, so you couldn't tell who to target until they turned on the remote reps on a triage carrier. Just in a ball of carriers, you'd never be able to tell. Nowadays, right, picking out a fax is pretty easy, but triage carriers, nope, you couldn't really tell. In theory, if you had your graphics up high enough, you could zoom in on them and look at the hulls and things like that. But I'll admit, Eve's a pretty game. But when I'm on grid doing something, I'm almost always zoomed all the way out so I can see the entire grid and constantly spinning my camera looking at the battle space. But I know you can do that if you turn it up high enough. You can zoom in out and actually see the different modules. Nessa, did the triage work the same back then? Yeah, basically it did. It would lock you into position, right? You couldn't warp, you couldn't jump. Um, so yeah, it's basically the same thing. Yeah, my first capital I ever lost, and this is all Arendis' fault. For those of you who know Arendis and Rep Swarm, this is all his fault. He and I were, I think there was actually three of us, but I only remember he and I doing this. And so what you would do with a group of carriers, we were repping a pause tower. What you would do is you would put one person into triage. You'd wait like 2 minutes, depending on how many triage you had. You'd wait 2 minutes, and then the next person would go into triage, or 1 minute, or 2.5, right? All depending on how many triage you had. So the theory was that if something happened, right, you could come out of triage and get into the pause shield, and you would sit right on the edge of the shield. Is how you would do this. And so he and I were out repping some pause somewhere. Uh, he had started his triage first. I was the second one to go into triage with it. We got jumped by hostiles. We had a support fleet there, but our fleet was no match for whoever was attacking us at that point in time. His triage came out. He got back into the shield. Mine did not. And so my very first capital loss was all because of Arendis. It's all his fault because he decided to go first on triage that day. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Arkin.
Let's be real, it was probably Black Legion back in the day that killed your carrier.
It
If
probably
it,
was. I mean, that would not be on them. Yeah, it probably was because we were living in. This is when we were still living up in Deck. We were probably out repping somebody's CSAA pause. That sounds like something we would have done. But yeah, if anybody's got any questions or anything like that, again, you can say them on comms. You can put them into fleet. We're a lot more chillax and open commie here than we usually are on a fleet because, of course, this is one of our classes.
Gamma found it, it was Black Legion and Noli Secunda
Sounds right. Yeah.
in F7C.
Oh, that's awesome.
Incredible.
I thought it was in Cloud Ring, but I couldn't remember for sure. Um, it was it an Archon? I don't even remember. I remember it
It's a
was Nidhogg.
Nidhogger.
Uh, yeah.
This is when you were in WeDot.
Yeah, I was still in Weedot at that point in time. I
Oh
didn't.
yeah, to your pause repping. Of course, it was a Nidhogger.
Yeah, so back at that point in time too, the carriers had bonuses for it. So if you were repping a pause, you usually used a Nidhogg because it had bonuses to the shield transfers, but you could put them on Archons and you could put them on a Thanatos as well. It didn't matter. You could put them on a Chimera also. And
Oh
so
yeah, mine had the whole reps for pause repping. It's the only time I ever used those.
hull repping pause modules is such bullshit. I mean, even today, and grant you, for those of you who are not never had to deal with this, here's what you would do, and it was the biggest middle finger to whoever owned that pause. So here's what we would do: you would shoot through the shield, through the armor to get it to go into reinforce. This is the actual modules on the outside of the shield, usually weapons, but it could be a scram or a web, whatever, but it's usually a weapon that you would do this with. Well, if you put it in like 1% hull, that wasn't that bad to wrap up. So what a lot of us would do when we would wrap these things is you would shoot it to about 50 or 60% hull on these modules. And again, you'd use carriers for this or supers. because their drones and everything didn't use ammo. So what did you care? And then the person has to make a choice because you cannot online that module if there is any hull damage to it at all. Shields don't matter, armor doesn't matter. It's the hull that had to be at 100%, or you could not online the module. So if you shot it to 1% damage, right? So it's a 99% hull. That was trivial, right? You could fix that with subcaps really easily. If you shot it to 50% hull, a lot of people would just say fuck it, and they would blow it up themselves and just put a new one in because it was faster to kill it than to actually rep it, because the hull transfers were so bad. They would transfer such a small amount, you would need a huge fleet to actually rep the pos modules. And so this was a classic thing that we did, is you would go through and you would just pick it and rep or sorry ref every single module on there, and you shoot them all to like 50%, 60%, something like that, just to be just a giant dick to whoever owned that pause. And we used to do that a lot. It's not like we did, everybody did that, but yeah, that was a classic thing. Finn, you're saying goons plus rifters. I honestly don't know what you mean by that, man. I mean, goons were known for flying rifters when they first joined the game. 2007 seems like that was kind of the thing, and it was a true thing. 2006. Yeah, it was. Goons and rifters was a thing. You can find some of the old propaganda posters from back at that point in time, which said something along the lines of "Your ammo costs more than our ships," which was true at that point in time. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of stories of when goons first joined. These are some of the Black Hand stories from uh, this point in time. There's a famous one where a goon got a carrier, and these were very, very rare. These were kind of expensive things, and no one believed that a goon could have a carrier. So this guy volunteered to help this corporation move. Goons were invading an area, and volunteered to help this corporation move his stuff, or I should say, their stuff. And what he did is he spent hours jumping back and forth between these two systems, one that goons were getting ready to invade, and one that goons were not in range to actually hit. Well, what actually ended up happening is they would trade this goon's stuff. He would undock, he would jump away, and like a minute later, he would come back because fatigue didn't exist then. You could just jump back and forth for hours. Basically, all you had to do was recharge a capacitor and have some fuel. And then they would give him new stuff. He would jump, come back, new stuff, jump, come back, all that kind of thing. Well, what he actually was doing is every time they traded him stuff, he would send out effectively a contract to a goon, and a direct contract to a goon, so that if you did an inventory check, you couldn't see that he was holding onto the stuff, because you can do that if you have the right rules and you know how to check that. So his carrier was empty. He would undock, an empty carrier, jump to the system, come back. They would give him new stuff. He would send a contract to basically to his handler. He was a Black Hand guy. Undock, jump, come back. And so they gave him all of this stuff that never actually moved and just ended up inside a Black Hand handler's hangar in that system. Uh, that corporation didn't last too much longer, because not only had this guy stolen member assets with it, he had taken basically corporation level assets as well. Because nobody believed that a goon could have a character like that, and he got one from like the Character Bazaar or something like that, which is how you used to do it. Uh, Misaki, your hotkey and mic. Um, okay, let's talk about a classic high sec scam here. Like I said, we're gonna do a little bit of like history of scams and everything like that for today. Given the week, we need a little levity. So high tech scams. I actually mentioned this one like 2 of these ago. I think I did it my first history one. Faction hulls, right? So faction hulls at this point in time was just a name. You would get a hull and it would say, so yeah, Raven State issue, Caracal Navy issue, Raven Navy issue, that kind of thing, right? It was just a name. There was no special icon to it. It's just a name. And so the most classic scam with these is you would get a regular Caracal. You would assemble it, right? So you could change the name. Yep, this is trade window scam. So you would change the name of it to being one of these special ones. And then you would type in Jita local. It's almost always done in Jita local there. For sale, this kind of thing for sale. But you would link an actual contract with it, right? The one that had been completed or something like that. It was an old contract. Yeah, the Armageddon. Yeah, you could do this with any of the faction halls at that point in time. And somebody would come up to you and say, "We'll do this since Nemus is here." So Nemus would come to me and say, "Hey, I'm interested in your Caracal Navy issue." And I'd be like, that's great. I would love to send you one, but unfortunately, all of my contract slots are used right now with other contracts. Can I just do a trade with you? And you're a little suspicious, right? Because Nemus is a suspicious person, rightly so. And you go, okay, and you're going to look at it, eagle eye. We open a trade window. I put the Caracal Navy issue in there. You can see it says Caracal Navy issue. You give me your hard earned iskies, right? We'll say that. Why not? We complete the trade, and you're going like, haha, I got myself one of these hulls. And then this is the second part of the scam. It was usually a 2-part piece. There was usually a buy order in the next system for this ship. And what you would do is you're saying, oh, well, this guy's an idiot. Why doesn't he just move that hull like 1 or 2 jumps over and he could sell it to this buy order? Well, it's my buy order. I put the buy order up. You undock your ship, you take it over there, you go to sell it, and Eve's like, you don't have the hull. Yes, I do. No, you don't, right? Eve's just going to come back and say, you don't have the proper thing for this buy contract or the buy order itself on the market. You repackage the hull, and that's when you realize that I didn't give you a Caracal Navy issue. I gave you a Caracal that I had renamed Caracal Navy issue. Why does this scam work so well? At this point in time, there was a skill. It's been changed, but there was a skill that would allow you to put in a fraction of the value on a buy order. So you only had to put up a small fraction of the amount of money for that buy order. That's how it would work. You could put up a whole bunch of these buy orders, and when they went to go and do it, yep, it's margin trading. That's what the skill was at that point in time. Doesn't do that now, but that's what it was then. The second version of this is the same kind of thing. It's just not dealing with faction hulls. But what you would do is you would put a buy order up. It's some usually random corner out of the way system, but that was still in the region so people could see it from Jita. It would work in any of the other trade hubs too, but usually this was done from Jita because it was the biggest one, of course. Ulai was actually the first one. It's actually mentioned in the video that was linked earlier. But it rapidly became Jita, and it has been Jita for 15 years now, 16 years. I don't remember when Ulai basically was killed. It was in the video, but I can't remember the date, but something like that. Anyways, you'd put that skill, right, that margin trading skill up, or you would use that margin trading skill, and then you would deliberately empty your character's wallet. So you would sell stuff, right? So we're gonna make Nemus the bad person here. So Nemus is gonna sell something in Jita. It's usually a module. Puts it up, and then she puts a spy order like 5 jumps away for a really good price. Usually more than what she has to sell one in Jita, or it's more, but it's close. Okay, and so somebody's looking at it and going, oh well, I can buy this one module, two modules, whatever it is, throw it into a transport, right into a hauler, go like 5 jumps and make a profit. Well, what Nemus did is when she put in that buy order, she emptied the wallet. So if you take the module to there and you go to sell it to that buy order, it will fail because the wallet doesn't have enough money in it to complete the transaction. But the margin trading skill let her put that buy order up with just a fraction of the needed money. And that's how that scam would work. So you would see it and it would look like this fabulous deal, and it's a total scam. And that's how they would do it. And it was a margin trading scam. Did anybody actually Is anybody willing to admit, did anybody actually fall for that one? It was super common. You don't see it as much anymore because the margin trading skill doesn't do that. But 10 years ago, 15 years ago, super common.
I think I did when I first started.
So the rename, so I didn't fall for that one, but that ship hull renamed one, a guy got me on one of those. Don't remember what the hull was, but he got me with one of those.
I used to do escrow scams back in the day. I've made my first billion at Eli making escrow scams, just renamed like you said.
Yeah. It was a classic one. Really, really effective. The other one that you used to see a lot, and I'll admit I don't sit in Jita all that much. And when I do, I usually turn off local because fuck those guys. But was the ISK doublers. And this was a really simple scheme. And what they would do, right, is they put into local, and in the bio of the character, it says, if you send me exactly 1 million ISK, right, I will double it for you and I will send you back 2 million. And there were, they had all these rules in there to try and, lawyer double speak as though anybody cared. Um, and what they would do a lot of times is, it's a very classic scamming, is they would, if you sent them like 5 million ISK, they would double it and send it back to you for 10 million, on the assumption that if they do it, you're going to send them more the next time. You're like, oh, well, it worked. So I sent them 5 million. I got 10 million back, exactly as they said that I would. Well, let's try it one more time and make sure that they're not, trying to trick me. So I'll send them 10 million ISK, right? I got 20 million back. And you're just like, this is great. And then you empty your wallet because they've honored their agreement twice, right? And so you send them, 100 million, 200 million, a billion ISK, whatever it is that you had, and that's what they keep. And so that was a classic one, right? We're going to pay you the first time because we know you're just testing us, right? It's just is this person legit? It is. Okay, they sent me a little bit of money, I will send it back to them. Oh, they sent me a little bit more money, I will send it back to them. And you would get to some point with these scammers, or whatever their magic threshold was, where they've decided, okay, they're not going to deal with you anymore and they're just going to take your money.
Does Minmatar not have like a special issue? Because they did my boy the Megathron dirty. It's just a normal Megathron, but if you look at the Amar ones, they're actually like gold.
I honestly don't know on that one, but it wouldn't surprise me, right? Trust in the rust.
Yeah.
And if you all don't know where that phrase comes from, you should watch the Clear Skies. It's a trilogy. The Clear Skies movies. It was made by an Eve fan. He got special permission from CCP to use some of their tools with it. But it's a fantastic little movie series. And whenever you hear somebody say the trust in the rust, it comes from that series, from one of the characters actually says that.
His name is John.
Yep. The best one was going through and watching it, and unfortunately the guy's girlfriend or wife, I think wife, uh, said that he was spending too much time on his Eve movies, and she made him stop, which is unfortunate because they did a fantastic.
I
Yeah,
remember he announced Clear Skies 4, but I think it got shot in the face.
yeah, it did because it should have been like 3, 4, 5 years ago. I think now it was a number of
Yeah.
years after Clear Skies 3 came out. But yeah, so stationary tires don't react well to 1400s. Yep, that's from that one as well. There's a lot of the one-liners that you've probably heard people say or seen it written out that actually come from this trilogy. Yeah, Galileo, me too. I admit I actually got the Clear Skies trilogy on DVD, had it shipped to me. Turned out I was a little bit annoyed because he's British, and so the coding doesn't work in my DVD and Blu-ray player. I have to watch it on my computer. I mean, whatever, but it means I couldn't project it on my big ass TV screen. I was a little annoyed, but is what it is. It's a fantastic trilogy. If you guys get a chance to watch it, to watch all three of them, I think it's like 2.5 hours. Like the first one's 30 minutes. I think the second one's also 30 minutes, and the third one's like an hour and a half or something. He did a lot of fun with that. Yeah, the last one is, and it did it really well. Just kind of a setup. You could just watch the third one without having watched the first two, and you probably enjoy it. But I do think watching the first two because it introduces like all of the characters. So there's a character of Mr. Smith in there that I get a very much kick out of. But yeah, it was really really well done. Okay, next, like scam, not really a scam, but next hijinks, I guess we'll call it. Again, we talked about this. I think the first history one we did, which is can flipping, and this is an old trick used against miners. And what you would do, right, is you're out mining. Usually, this was like your first mining barge. You're out in, some system. You just got a mining barge. You're just getting used to it, and you're going, oh my god, the ore hole on these things is really small compared to how much they mine, which is true. And so you would jet can it. You would fill up your ore hole. You would right click jet can, and then you would just start dumping your ore into the jet can. After some period of time, maybe you had multiple cans, maybe it's just one, didn't really matter, but you would get an alt come out with a transport. Maybe you were doing it yourself if you only had one account. But they would do, right? Um, the griefers, these guys aren't scammers, these guys are griefers. What they would do is they would take the ore out of your jet can, right? They're now stealing from you. You can legally shoot them now because they have stolen from you. And they'd put it into their jet can, right? They'd pull like one unit of ore into their cargo hold and then eject a jet can and then drag the ore from your jet can into theirs. And you could do that. Well, then when you see them doing this, your natural inclination is, what the hell? What are you doing? So you go and take the ore back out of their jet can and put it into yours, right? Those bastards stealing from you. Well, now you are stealing from them and then they shoot you. And that's called can flipping. Again, not a scam. That's just a griefing technique. But it's yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's a classic one used in high sec. I mean, low sec and null sec, it doesn't matter. They'll just shoot you. But it's a classic one used in high sec to avoid being concorded. The other version of it is they may sit there with a mining ship, um, and just off grid one of their buddies will have a combat ship. A lot of times people used to use a Brutix for this, but it didn't matter all that much. Uh, Mr. Bluff, what was he doing filamenting in Orca? Was he using a combat Orca? That's actually a thing. They're actually tougher than you might think they are when they're combat fit. Wow, that's cold. That is cold-blooded. I kind of like it. Um, yeah, definitely not falling into the scam again. Not a scam. That would fall into the griefing category. But um, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a new one because the filaments haven't been around, all that long. I mean, years at this point in time. But
Relatively speaking.
yeah, for us bitter old people, they have not been around that long. But that's a good one. That's a new one. I have to admit, I have not seen that one. So the final big one that I was going to tell you all about is a classic pyramid scheme. This was one to where they would promise, right? Because there's no central bank of Eve, right? That you can deposit ISK in with an automated thing, right? People can get loans from and have your stuff be secure. That doesn't exist, right? Players have created that, right? The lending bee that we have is an example of a player created version to where the faith is based on us, right? There's no Eve mechanic that guarantees that. What we do is we run it out of a separate corporation. This came up and it was like, is our assets for the lending bee program secured so that they couldn't be stolen? Like several other corporations were hit just last week when everything happened with Jay. The answer is yes to that because we deliberately isolated that corporation, spreading out that risk. So those assets were never in danger. And that's the way that you would do it. Well, that's just faith in us. There's no Eve mechanic for this. So what this group did, it was run by one guy at the beginning. And what he did is he said, he would just go around HiSec, mostly to the trade hubs, and would just say, if you give me your money, I'm running a trading group. I've got this route, it makes tons of profit, and I will promise you 10% on your ISK every month, 10%. 10% interest, of course. And we gave him some money. My CEO and I talked about it. We gave him some money. And we're like, okay, we're sure this is a scam, but we weren't sure exactly how it was a scam. He put a lot of time into this. He had a website. He actually had subsidiary bankers who would do all the processing, that would credit your account, that would pay you ISK directly. You could choose to reinvest your interest, or they would just pay it to you on a monthly kind of thing. Well, it was a pyramid scheme. So for those of you who don't know how a pyramid scheme works, the principle is really, really simple. I promise you all something that you basically cannot deliver, right? That's impossible. And what you do is you give me the money. Now I pay you your interest, right? Top of the month, whatever it is, as it's supposed to be. But I'm not actually making any money. I'm just holding your money. And then I go and find somebody else who invests money. And now I have both of your sets of money to pay the two of you interest on. And it just keeps going like that to where the new people who are investing are actually paying the interest of the previous sets of people. So if you're in on the ground floor of a pyramid scheme like this, you can actually make a great deal of money because you will be paid out, right? Because that's how these things perpetuate is everybody goes, oh yeah, I got my interest payment every month, and they do. That's the way the scheme works and perpetuates. But eventually you get to the point to where people start withdrawing their money and you can no longer afford to pay them, right? Not only the interest, but you just don't have the money to pay the principal. This is what happened in real life here in the US with Bernie Madoff. That's actually how those schemes collapse usually. The Eve one collapsed because the guy got over $1 trillion ISK and just said, screw it. I'm tired of doing this. I don't want to deal with people anymore. Fired all of his bankers. He had several of them processing all of this, kicked all their alts out of the corporation, shut down the website, and basically moonwalked away with like $1 trillion ISK. And that was a huge amount of money at this point in time. This would have been about 2011, 2012, something like that. Uh, And he did, and he said even in press releases at the time that the only reason he shut it down is because he just got tired of dealing with people. That was the only reason. He was making money hand over fist with it. He's just like, tired of dealing with everybody, so I'm just going to take your money and go. Uh, Mr. Bluff, is that the orca filament jumping thing, that video that you put in there? Cool. Yeah. So if you all want to take a look at that, Mr. Bluff put that one in there. Those are basically kind of the major like scams and everything that have gone through. All of those that I told you all basically perpetuated in high sec. Uh, Low sec doesn't really have stories like that, right? Because you can't really can flip people in low sec because they'll just shoot you, right? It doesn't. They don't care. Doesn't doesn't matter. Same thing in null sec. Same thing again as wormholes. Uh, for something like what happened to us just this last week, uh, we've done this ourselves. It's been quite a while since one of these kinds of things where the clone bay being turned off or a citadel being changed like that has occurred. Um, Now there was no citadel flipping, right? All of our stuff stayed, all of our structures stayed under our control. But that's a thing. This was talked about a great deal on the fireside yesterday. It's you got to trust people because one person cannot be around all the time to do this kind of thing. Uh, so that's just kind of the issue. The last time I remember this happened um, was the judge when he gave us control of an enemy keepstar. It's actually a video of Mittens sitting in the controlling seat, grabbing that module, dragging it out, and seeing the pop up that showed up with how many thousands of clones he was about to destroy. We don't know how much that was worth. CCP never actually came out and said it was this much ISK. They did this time. You can read into that however you will. They never said when we did it to somebody else. It was only publicized when somebody did it to us. You can tinfoil that as much as you want, but that's the reality for it. So this is a mechanic that everybody knows about. It's a thing. Um, I think we killed like 8 or 9,000 clones when we did it, something like that. That's pretty much all the stories that I've got. If anybody has any questions or anything like that, please speak up for it. Yeah, it's it's one of those things as was just put in. It's funny when it's not you, right? But that's the way Eve has always been. You watch somebody get ganked, you're like, oh, that's hilarious because it wasn't you that just got ganked. I mean, that's Eve for you. The original Ice Interdiction campaign that was so many years ago. This was the predecessor to Burn Jita. My Orca got ganked by a group of goons. Uh, yeah, I thought I was safe with it. I knew they were around. I knew it was happening. I knew they were going to be in the system I was going to travel through. So I like bulkheaded the shit out of this Orca. And it didn't matter. They just used like 10 more guys and killed me anyways. I was annoyed and I ended up joining Goons, and I'm now the chief of staff of Goon Swarm. Uh, and you bastards ganked me when I was in high sec. So that's Eve for you. It's amazing how many people join corporations and stick around and do everything um, because they want vengeance, right? They got ganked. They're going to go out and get their vengeance. Or they got ganked and somebody reached out to them and said, hey, man, these are the mistakes that you made. Uh, here's maybe a little bit of money to help you get back on your feet. Or, you're just sitting there talking and you go through. That's a pretty classic thing. There's a lot of people get recruited into corporations because of that. Yeah, so there's two two entries right there. I'll just read them for those of you who are not in fleet. Uh, so we went out to HiSec and ganked Galileo, right? He was in a small corporation. That person or somebody in his corporation went to Karma Fleet and he went along behind them. Sure. I mean, that happens a lot. Uh, Nemus is one of those terrible people who has been on the other side of wormhole evictions of our groups. I'll give you a pass on that, Nemus, right? Wormhole space is just weird. I've lived in wormhole space a couple of times. We got evicted one time, and the other time there was drama in my corporation, and we just left because it just wasn't working. Mr. Bluff, I like that. It was in Molden Heath. That's a name I don't hear too much. Uh, so what happened to the wormhole sig? Demus's answer of drama in all caps is pretty accurate. The wormholes, by their very definition, is a very insular kind of area. They don't have the like connections and the camaraderie that we have in nullsec, where you see everybody all the time and there's always kind of in the same area. Because of the way the wormhole connections move, getting reinforcements into a wormhole is much more difficult to do. When I lived in wormholes, I was the logistics guy, and it was my thing. As soon as I would log in every day, is where's our static? How close is it to Jita? How can I get the fuel? Fuel blocks didn't exist back then. You had to get each individual component of fuel, and there's about 10 of them. It was a pain in the ass. How to do all of those kinds of things. So they become a very insular group, and that just causes drama. Yeah, Mr. Bluff. Now that's an interesting one. How you're stealing his stuff. Um, my answer to that is get fucked, wormhole puppy. But that's just me. It's funny you said that you wouldn't have friends. I love that. Yeah. Um, they're not known for like even those people who claim that they will 1v1 you at the sun. It's always a scam. By the way, they've usually got remote reps or something like that. It used to be a thing. Um, Actually, yeah, let's talk about a remote rep 1v1 scam. I didn't even think about that one. That's a good one. So here's what they would do, right? This is when you could have the honorable combat with it, and you would go in and say, all right, I'm gonna have a duel with you. We're gonna meet at the sun and we're gonna do this. And it's all fine, well and good, right? So you're allowed to do that. But then what they would do is they would bring a logistics ship with them, like a scimitar or something and on arrows, depending on whether they're shield or armor tanked. Well, you can only shoot them because that's the um, dual requirement. Is it's between two individual players. Their logistics guy is not involved in it. So if you shoot the logistics guy, you will be concorded for it. And they would do this all the time. Again, it's a pretty classic one. Cash Me at the Sun. Yeah, that woman went just viral for that one. That's a good one. I'm going to step away for just a second here, guys. I got a little puppy dog who wants to go outside. I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so those are kind of the scams. Anybody have any questions or stories or anything like that? The move up is going to be occurring here in about half an hour, so if you are still up north and you need to do that, just keep an eye out for pings for that. Okay. I think we'll call it a day with this one. We were going to do this one shorter just because there is the op coming up here. So thank you all for coming out. I hope you enjoyed it. I will post this on YouTube once everything finishes rendering and uploads, and all of those words. I'll stick around for a few minutes, but we'll call it a day. Everybody enjoy your Sunday, like morning, afternoon, evening, wherever it is that you are. Uh, for those of you who may be traveling this week for the holidays here in the U.S., travel safe, right? Make sure you're doing okay. And if you're flying somewhere, I would suggest you get to the airport a little bit earlier. I heard last week that 55 million Americans are going to travel this year. So that's about 1 in 6. So get to the airport a little bit earlier if you're traveling on Tuesday or Wednesday. And don't get filamented into nullsec. Nice. I like it. So those of you who are out there, you see Neva's talking about fuel. Yeah. Whenever you all bastards move your caps around anywhere, I usually get a poke from Nema saying, the cap can's out of fuel again. Which is fair. Yeah, thanks for coming out, everybody. Have a good day.